Hello, I'm Robert, and you're welcome here in my biz little shop. On today's episode of What's on My Workbench, I've got some belts that I'm working on. I thought maybe you'd like to join in here on some of it. There's a few things here that I had to learn the hard way, and I thought, maybe I'll show those to you and it'll maybe help somebody. But let's jump over here on the workbench. Appreciate you taking time to be with me in the shop today. So this belt that I'm working on will be a Ranger belt, and you've seen me make the Ranger belt before. This is the back part of it, that billet. The billet that makes up the tongue that goes through your buckle is this here. And I'm bringing it up. I don't see anything wrong with Pike Peak Saddlery's template, because it says it's a 1-inch template, and for a 1-inch buckle. This buckle here that I purchased from probably the largest national distributor of hardware is labeled as a 1-inch right here. Try to slide that through there and it's not going to fit. There's no way. So the first time I used this whole buckle set, I got the whole belt finished and had about 5 hours worth of work in it, and got down to mounting the buckle and putting the tongue through there, and it wouldn't fit. So that's kind of a first tip, and maybe that's commonplace for everybody else to see if 1 inch is 1 inch, but it's about 15/16 is what will fit through there. So that's one thing. So if you're using this template set here, Pike Peak Saddlery's done the right thing. It is 1 inch, but that buckle is not. So just make sure that your hardware is correct. And it's not just that buckle. This seems to be kind of an industry-wide issue, that you buy 1-inch buckles or 1.5-inch buckles and they don't match up to what they say they are. And I don't know if it's an issue where they're being made to a metric standard and they're just labeling it as 1 inch. But make sure you always check your buckle to make sure it's going to fit with your billet. So that's the one on that. The next thing I wanted to show you is when I install these faux turquoise spots, I've got it here in the first layer of my Western belt here, and it's the right length here. But the one thing that you have to be careful about is that when you go to drive the rivet together, that you don't end up with it twisted or pushed offside. And the one way that I find that works pretty well to help me with that is I will take a piece of cardboard and I will push that spot into it. And you can probably hear it pop through here in a moment if I get it in the right spot. I don't know if you heard it, but there's a little dimple there. I do that because it seems like it helps hold that spot upright when you go to set it. And now I can use my setter on the back side here. The first hit just mashes through the cardboard here further, like that, and now it is set good. And when I first started setting these, I had some issues with trying to keep it balanced and upright. So I find now that I have that spot in the cardboard, I will just nestle the next one into that. And I'm doing it on a Pondo board here. And I like that as well because it's soft enough to where it doesn't damage that, but it gives enough resistance that it sets properly. So there's the next one. So I just use that when I'm setting it. And I just find that it helps make that a more reliable set. And I have had them twist out of place. And I've had to take some pliers and cut them off and get them out of there. But it was really, I think, more early on. The other thing to do is to make sure that the hole that you create for this rivet, make sure that it's somewhat tight on the leather, and that helps to hold it upright as well. And I'm not wailing on it hard, but I'm making sure it's firmly set. So I think they look pretty good. I'm just using some Weldwood contact adhesive here to prepare to line this belt with my 2 layers. And you can see here where I tie the that center stitching on the back side here, and then the contact adhesive would hold it. And you know, I had someone point out, you know, typically when I do that and I hammer that down, you don't see where that knot is. It just kind of gets buried in the thickness of the 2 layers of leather. But I had someone make a good point, is that probably don't even need to put a knot there, because the 2 layers is going to sandwich those threads together, and there's not much chance of trying to dig those out. But I don't find that on this thicker leather that it's an issue of that leather hiding the knot. But if you are making this and you're making it maybe out of some thinner leather, we've got about 12 ounces here combined between the 2 layers. But if you're doing it with thinner leather, then you could always, I think, just leave like a couple inches of thread tail on there, glue it down, and when you sandwich the 2 layers together, I can't see how you could ever dig that thread out of there. I guess I'm kind of in that column of people ask why you do it a certain way, and well, it's because that's the way I've always done it. Speaking of kind of always did it that way, it reminds me of a story about a newlywed couple, and they were having an Easter ham, and the wife cut the ends off of the ham before she put it in the pan to go in the oven. And the new husband asked why she cut the ends off of it, and she said, well, that's the way that Mom always did it. She cut the ends off the ham before she put it in the pan to go in the oven. And thought it was a little bit odd, but you know, family traditions or whatever. So the next year at Easter, they were at the in-laws' house, and he asked, you know, why, you know, they cut the ends of the ham off, and she said, well, that's because the pan that I put it in won't hold the ham with the 2 ends on it. So sometimes we do things that become traditions, and sometimes we don't even know why, and sometimes it might be just as simple as answers, that's what fit. So I'm going to go ahead and finish putting the contact adhesive on these 2 layers of this belt, and I call this belt the turquoise black western, and just because it's got those fake turquoise spots on it. And I always make sure that all of my clients know that it's not real turquoise. Here are my 2 billets. I've glued up 2 layers like I do on my belts for these 2 billets, and I'll lay them out on here. So I have to keep in mind that that buckle will not fit with this width, so I'm going to have to take a little bit off of that width. And the way I'm going to do that is I'll just cut on the inside. I'm kind of tipped out so that I keep it tight there against the bottom of the template. And I'm making it with 1 keeper, so it's this hole here. And then when I cut, I'll just cut on the inside of that, because you can see that where that's at, that's 1 inch. So it's pretty exact. So if I cut on the inside of that, I can take probably a 32nd of an inch off of both sides, and I'll do some finish sanding to make sure that that fits when I get that cut out. And I'll do the exact same thing here on my other billet. I think I said earlier when I showed these new templates, shouldn't have lifted that, should I? I guess the other option is I could just push this over a little bit now. And so on these templates, I think I did a video when I first purchased them from pikespeaksaddlery.com. And I really like how they're really simplified planning the Ranger belt. It's not as complicated as it may look from the surface, but I'll just cut on the inside of these. I'll sand it a little bit there to make sure that they're true, and then I'll test fit them on the buckle here. But yeah, I was so disappointed the very first time that I used those buckles and found out that they were way too narrow. It was really frustrating. Those things always happen when you're on a time constraint as well. I'm just trying to cut on the inside of that line just slightly. And I've said it before, don't try to push all the way through with your first cut. I'm more focused on getting the cut where I want it. When I come back with my next cut, it follows that original cut easier. The rain's kind of slowed down out there. Here in the mountains, it's not unusual to get afternoon thunderstorms and rain showers. Let's see how much work I have to do on this yet. It's pretty good. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Maybe a slight sanding on it. Now, I do want to set this tip on there, and you'll see that it takes a narrower billet here at the end. So I'll have to custom cut this by hand. What I will say is a good tip, and I probably need to buy one, but I don't have a 3/4 inch English point punch. If you do, if you center that on here, that pretty much fits inside of here. Then you just have to work on the extension of it and the finish cut. But what I'll do on here is I'll have to use my wing dividers here, and I will create a relief that's basically an 1/8 inch or so off of the edge here. So it'll be kind of like this. And then I'll cut around that. But I'm going to wait until I get ready to set the hardware before I put that on there. So I'm really kind of juggling two belts here at once. Sometimes that's not a good idea, but I think I'm doing okay here. So these areas here, if you leave that thread that way, that'll telegraph through over time. I just line it up here along the sides of the stitching, and it keeps that from standing out. Hear a little thunder out there. It's sunny here now. That's up in the mountains further. I mainly focus on the edges, and then I'll use a burnisher on the middle area. If you see it, it kind of helps define those stitches a little bit. It's not a hard impact. This will have black stitching along the outside edges here. I need to cut this to length and trim the edges, so I'm ready to do that. This is a 40-inch belt, so I want to find the center of the wearer's back here. There's 1, 2, 3 full ones out here, 1, 2, 3 full ones there. So it's the center of there. So that means the fold over for this belt is going to be at 20 inches. Which is going to be right here is where the fold over is going to be. And then the end of the belt is 3.5 inches from there. So I'll mark that. There's the end. So there's the end there. So if this is a 40-inch belt for the wearer, that means the whole length of the belt should be 50 inches on here. 10 inches includes the holes past where the wearer uses it and the fold over on the other end. So I'll mark 50, and actually I'm going to mark it a 1/4 inch less than that. I'll explain why here in a moment. This one also has a Laramie buckle set. This is an inch, this is 1 1/4 inches, so I have to get out one of my 1 1/4 inch ones, but it'll go on here. So I mentioned it on the other one there, but if it's an 1 1/4 inch Laramie set, to make it fit inside of the metal tip, you go a 1/4 inch smaller. So all I'll do now is I'll take this and put this on my center spot here in the belt, and then I will look at the wing part of this and make sure it's centered, in other words equal on both sides. Like that. Then all I'll need to do is extend that here when I get ready to set the tip for this. Right now I'm just going to cut this off here. It'll have to be longer than that when I'm done. I do this in stages because I'm going to be sewing along the edge, and I want to make sure that my threads aren't cut when I'm done. So now all I need to do is trim this liner to the belt width. If you're worried about nicking the edge of the belt, you can always cut close and then sand it down to it. That's a lot of work, but it's also disappointing, and I've done it in my early belts where you're working along here and then you end up nicking the edge of the top layer here. And now you're trying to deal with a divot. Hopefully I don't jinx myself talking about it. but I've got that Leather Machine Company sander burnisher. And I really don't care for the burnishing side of it. If it was, I would just call it a sander. I don't use the burnish on it. It doesn't do as good a job as I can do by hand. I suppose if I had physical restraints that kept me from doing the burnish on it, that I would use it, but I've never gotten a nice burnish on it. But then again, after a few minutes, I'm like, no, this isn't working, and I move on to how I used to do it. All right. So we're making progress here. I'm going to dye the back of this. You know, I have left some natural on the back, and I don't remember if I made a note about that when I took the order or not. That doesn't say. I may just leave the back natural. I kind of like that. To me, it's kind of a custom look to it. I'll dye the edges after I have sanded them and burnished them, but I might leave the back natural. Now on this Ranger belt, it's going to have white stitching around the outside. The leather is being left natural. I'll oil it, and then I'm going to put tan coat on this to allow it to be oiled through it. I've got another one of these I'm making, and the person wants it to stay as natural color as long as possible, so I'm going to use Reslene on that. That'll help it keep from picking up oils off of handling it and having it get more color as a result of that. And I like to leave the edges, the corners square until I have put in the stitch line here. And part of the reason why, well, there's two reasons why. One is I feel like it's easier for me to keep this guide along this square edge than if it's a rounded edge. But the other reason is if I do the rounding over after I've done the stitching, if there's any puckering at all from the stitches, then that round over will help clear some of that up. Just cutting a light groove. I don't try to cut an extra deep groove here. It's not necessary. When I pull the threads down, they get buried in there pretty well, especially when I tap them in. So that was one of the other tips there, and I won't bore you with the whole sewing part of it there. I appreciate you taking time to be with the shop today. Here is how that Ranger belt in the natural with the Laramie buckle set on there, how it looks when it's finished. I think it looks pretty cool. These are matching spots to the buckle, Laramie spots there as well. I think those are 1/2 inch, maybe it's 3/8. I think it makes a very classy looking belt. And then this belt here, I don't have it finished yet. I'll have black stitching along the outside edges, and I'll have the same buckle, tip, and loop set on this as on the other belt there. And I think Mark will really like the belts when they're finished. I appreciate you taking time to be with me in the shop today. Please like, share, and subscribe. But more importantly, I hope you have a great day.